Okay, now the covalent bonds was quite a mouthful, maar die ander twee behoort 'n bietjie vinniger te gaan. So ons het gesê kovalente bindings is wanneer daar elektrone gedeel word. Nou ioniese bindings is wat ek in die ander video genoem het, wanneer die elektrone oorgedra word. En jy moet weet, dit kom voor tussen metale en nie-metale. So for instance, when we're looking at sodium chloride, dan is natrium mos 'n metaal en chloor is 'n nie-metaal. And what you also need to know is that it's a transfer of electrons from the metals to the non-metals. Hoe weet ons dit? As ons gaan kyk na daai elektronegativiteite waarvan ek vir julle in die vorige video gesê het, you will see that the non-metals tend to have a much higher electronegativity. Ons werk met chloor 3, fluor 4, suurstof 3,5. Much higher than the metals that you have on the left-hand side. They have an affinity of 1, 0,9, 0,8. In other words, the non-metals like to have the electrons, while the metals don't mind losing them. So die metale gaan elektrone skenk aan die nie-metale. You guys also need to keep in mind those atomic ions that we did in the first term, hulle is ook ione, so hulle neem deel in ioniese bindings. So wees net bewus van hulle ook. So what happens is, it happens in steps. Daar gaan eers 'n oordrag van elektrone wees, en ek het vir julle een hierso geteken waaroor ons nou gaan praat. So the first step will be that the electron or electrons is transferred from the metals to the non-metals, en onthou dan beteken dit, beide die metale en die nie-metale het nou nie meer eweveel elektrone en protone nie. So if they don't have the same amount of protons in the nucleus as electrons in the outer shell, it means that they will now have a positive or a negative charge. Die metale gaan positief raak omdat hulle mos elektrone afgestaan het, en die nie-metale gaan negatief raak omdat hulle elektrone bygekry het. And that's why when we talk about oxygen, we normally talk about oxygen 2 minus because it gained 2 electrons. While if we look at magnesium, we say magnesium 2 plus because that lost electrons. Okay, so dan het die katione en die anione gevorm. Remember, cations are the positives, so that would be the metals, and anions are the negatives, so that will be the non-metals of jou polyatomiese ione. Okay, and they then have Coulomb forces between them. So we were just done with electrostatic forces. Remember, electrostatic forces are Coulomb forces that occur between positive and negative charges. So dis dan wat nou hier gebeur. Baie belangrik, hiervoor is die elektronegativiteit tussen die twee groter as 2,1. The smallest unit is an ion. So let's quickly recap. For covalent bonds, we say it's sharing of electrons. For ionic bonds, we say it's transfer of electrons. By kovalente binding sê ons die kleinste eenheid is 'n molekule, en by ioniese binding sê ons die kleinste eenheid is 'n ion. And the last thing is, for covalent bonds, we say that it occurs between non-metals, and ionic bonds, we say it occurs between a non-metal and a metal. Okay, so net gekom vir julle te wys hoe dit gebeur. As ons nou kyk na die vorming van natriumkloried. We can all agree that that's a metal and a non-metal. So if I draw the Lewis structure of sodium, it means that it only has this one electron, and it is going to lose that electron. So dit gaan vorm 'n ion en 'n los electron. Why is that loose electron important? Because that can now go in the next step. There. Want dan het ek 'n chloor en hy het hierso 'n plekkie vir nog 'n elektron. So this electron will go and sit there, and it forms this chlorine ion. Hoe weet ons dis 'n ion? Want onthou chloor het nou meer elektrone as wat hy protone in sy kern het, because it gained that one electron. So it becomes a chlorine ion, and the sodium here has one less electron than it has protons in its nucleus, so that becomes plus. So the first step is the forming of the ions. Onthou, dit gaan altyd die metaal wees wat sy elektron verloor, en die nie-metaal wees wat die elektron optel, and then once those are formed, they can go and they have Coulomb forces between them. So they attract one another, because remember, positive and a negative is opposite charges they attract, en dan sê hulle, okay, ons is meer stabiel as ons tyd by mekaar spandeer. So then they form an ionic bond. Okay, en die laaste ene waarna ons gaan kyk is metaalverbindings. So this one is nice and easy. It always occurs between metals. What happens is the nucleus of the metals are so tightly packed that their orbitals can actually overlap. En omdat hulle orbitale oorvleuel, beteken dit die elektrone kan vrylik beweeg tussen hulle. So the electrons are moving around in those orange orbitals that I tried to draw there. En hulle kan dan rond beweeg na die buurman atoom toe. So the valence electrons can move around and we call them delocalized, gedelokaliseer. The positive nucleus that remains forms this crystal lattice. So hy vorm hierdie kristalstruktuur en dit is hoekom meeste metale vaste stowwe is, want daai kristalstruktuur is baie sterk. And as that forms, the electrons can then move around between them. En die kleinste partikel daarvan is hierdie positiewe kern. And for this to take place, we need two things. We need a low ionization energy, wat beteken die valensie elektron kan maklik uitdaai en uitbeweeg na die een langsom toe. En daar moet ook plek wees in die buurman se orbitaal vir die elektron om na toe te beweeg. Okay, grade 10s. For this year, we are focusing mostly on when the different bonds occur. When can we class it as a ionic, when is it a covalent, and when is it a metallic bond? En julle moet weet wat is die verskil tussen hulle. So vir huiswerk vanmôre, doen asseblief vir my oefening 9 op bladsy 142. I want you to do number 1. You guys can peruse number 2 and number 3 as well. Those are stuff that we did previously, the general name, how ions will bond in which relationship to one another. Als goed wat ons gedoen het in kwartaal 1 en kwartaal 2. But it is important to know those things. And then I also want you to complete number 5, the table there. Dit is 'n lekker opsomming vir julle. As jy nie wil terugblaai nie, sal jy sien op die bladsy langs aan het hy presies daai selfde opsomming daar.